My parents just couldn't take care of me, so I've been in foster care for most of my life.
I'm in high school and I used to live with my dad who didn't work. I had a part-time job, but all my paychecks went to my dad who used them to buy drugs.
So one day I came home and found all my clothes boxed up in the front yard. I called her and she was sorry, but she told me it was either I had to leave or her boyfriend would leave her.
I'm just staying on couches right now, but since me and my dad moved around so much, I don't have any friends. And since I don't have an address, I'm not working anywhere.
I stopped giving him paychecks, so he kicked me out of the house.
It's 2 days before my 18th birthday and I've never had to live on the street before.
I don't know where I'm going to go.
I was the second oldest of 7 kids, growing up in a middle-class suburban neighborhood. My family was very religious, very conservative, and we were very involved in our church, very involved in our community. When I was 16, I got a ride home from a church event with a man from the church who didn't take me home. He took me into a parking lot and molested me. Kind of because of the nature of what happened and how embarrassing it was and how devastating it was, I couldn't talk to my family about it. I couldn't talk to my parents. I started becoming really depressed. I started cutting myself, drinking, smoking pot. What my parents saw was a teenager who was starting to rebel and starting to go a little, get out of control. And it just continued to get worse and worse. And they locked me up in an inpatient mental health facility. And when I was released from the hospital, I knew that I couldn't go home. There was just too much damage that had been done. I was very angry. I was angry at God, and I was angry at my family, and I was pretty angry at the whole world, that this had happened to me when I was a really good girl. The area that we grew up in, those kind of things aren't supposed to happen. I decided that I needed to find myself and figure out who I was and what was going on, and I had an opportunity to hop freight trains across the country. And that's what I chose to do. I spent the next 3 years being homeless.
Because youth homelessness, it comes from family conflict and not necessarily from poverty and inability to pay rent. Kids come from everywhere.
Right after I left the mental ward, that was actually in Minneapolis, and I never went back out to the suburbs. There weren't any resources available out there.
If the family conflict gets to a place where they need to leave or they're asked to leave, then they'll do that, staying with friends. I think in rural areas and suburban areas, kids end up sleeping in cars.
Understand that it does exist out there too, and it's not just a problem that we have here in our cities.
We see kids who may not find something to help them in their own community come here to the cities seeking services. Those youth are really vulnerable.
And it was a very dangerous, very terrifying time for me, having grown up in a very sheltered, very conservative background. During my stay in different squats, I had to fight off cold and hunger and people who were trying to exploit me and take advantage of the situation. And there's a lot of dangerous, scary people that are out there.
I think transportation is a huge barrier in rural communities. If you live in Bemidji and you find a job, you might not, have a way to get to that job unless you buy a car. And then just lack of resources. I mean, here in the metro area, we have 2 drop-in centers, we have a youth-oriented food shelf, there's lots of programs. Now, that doesn't mean that we take care of the entire need, because we still have waiting lists that are, 15, 20 people long in our longer-term programs, and we're still turning, 2 to 11 referrals a night away from our shelter because there isn't enough space, but we do have a lot more going on than the rural areas.
More of the homeless youth that are out there are the ones who are serving you at Burger King and working at the McDonald's.
They're sort of the invisible homeless, because, they are teenagers and they are young adults and they want to blend in and they don't want to have the stigma of being homeless. So I tell folks sometimes, do you shop at the Mall of America? Have you ever bought a pair of shoes at Foot Locker? It's pretty highly likely that the young person who checked you out might be living in a shelter. You won't look at them and know that they're homeless.
They try very hard to hide the fact that they're homeless. They're staying on people's couches. They're staying in people's basements. They're having a week here and a week there of being at different people's houses so that they are very under the radar. Even in Minneapolis, even in a big city, they've all been pushed underground where you don't necessarily walk around and see populations of homeless youth. I think that people would be very surprised and shocked to learn how many homeless youth there are out on the streets on any given night.
When all the shelter beds are full and it's cold, they will give kids enough bus tokens to ride the buses all night long because it's lit and it's warm and it's public, so it's safer than any place else outdoors. That's where we've fallen as a society, is that our kids have to ride buses all night to stay warm.
Being able to mentor and believe in the young people that are around you, getting educated about the facts, finding out the statistics, finding out the numbers of people that are homeless in your community.
Well, I always tell folks that the first thing that I want them to do is be the cool parent on the block. Research shows that having a healthy relationship with an adult can make or break it for a young person. So be that cool mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or aunt or whatever on the block that gives young people a space to be themselves.
And advocating for the system to be different.
And then I tell people to call your representatives, call your senators, call your city council people and tell them that you're outraged. You're outraged that children are homeless. What kind of world do we live in where we let our kids be on the streets?
They're not bad kids. They're good kids who have had really bad things happen to them.